You're listening to Missing Persons, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime,
Beyond Bizarre True Crime,
Citizen Detective, and
Campus Killings.
All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its creators, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss a missing persons case on this podcast, please be sure to visit missingpersonspodcast.net. This episode may contain unsettling or disturbing subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Missing Persons, a podcast dedicated to spreading the word about people who have vanished under mysterious or unexplained circumstances and the family members who are looking for answers. I'm Jess Betancourt.
And I'm Mike Morford. Together, we created this podcast to help give a voice to people who continue to search for their missing loved ones. In some cases, even after decades have gone by. In each episode, you'll hear from Jess giving listeners the backstory and the basic facts of the disappearance.
Then Mike will speak with someone who's intimately connected to the missing person, and his guest will share their story with us.
Please stay tuned at the conclusion of this episode to hear about our Patreon program and our commitment to help find people who have gone missing. We'll also share with you where you can find more information and how you can join our team and help our efforts. You'll get recommendations for other podcasts we think you'll enjoy and more.
So sit back and enjoy this episode, and who knows, maybe you can help us find someone who's missing. Welcome to Missing Persons, a podcast dedicated to spreading the word about people who have vanished under mysterious or unexplained circumstances and the family members who are looking for answers. I'm Jess Betancourt.
And I'm Mike Morford. Together, we created this podcast to help give a voice to people who continue to search for their missing loved ones. In some cases, even after decades have gone by. In each episode, you'll hear from Jess giving listeners the backstory and the basic facts of the disappearance.
Then Mike will speak with someone who's intimately connected to the missing person, and his guest will share their story with us.
Please stay tuned at the conclusion of this episode to hear about our Patreon program and our commitment to help find people who have gone missing. We'll also share with you where you can find more information and how you can join our team and help our efforts. You'll get recommendations for other podcasts we think you'll enjoy and more.
So sit back and enjoy this episode, and who knows, maybe you can help us find someone who's missing. Episode 70, Marie Beulah Smith Mueller. Marie Beulah Smith was born on December 26, 1928, one of 13 children. In March 1972, she was married to Dr. Don Mueller, and they adopted two children, Don Jr. and Donna, who were just 5 and 7 respectively when their mother disappeared. The Muellers lived at 2 Country Estates Place in Frontenac, Missouri, a well-to-do suburb of St. Louis. Dr. Mueller had a successful medical practice, and to the outside world, all seemed well with the Muellers. However, 43-year-old Marie had had health issues. Some reports say that she had endured a double mastectomy, and she often wore wigs to disguise hair loss. But her daughter Donna, who is our guest today, was not told exactly what malady her mother suffered from, so we don't know details about the state of Donna's health. And the relationship between Marie and Don had fragmented, and the two were in the midst of a protracted divorce proceeding. Let's get to the disappearance. Marie was reported missing by her husband, Don Mueller. Dr. Mueller walked into the Frontenac police station around 3 p.m. on March 30th of 1972. The police report states, quote, Dr. Donald W. Mueller stated that on the advice of his attorney, Charles Shaw, he would like to make an official missing persons report on his wife, end quote. The report goes on to say, quote, Dr. Mueller had reported to this department on March 10th that his wife had left the residence on Sunday, March 5th, and had not been seen since. However, at that time, he did not wish to make an official missing persons report, but but reported the same only to inform this department should inquiries be received from other agencies. At the time of the earlier report, Dr. Mueller expressed concern over his wife's mental condition and felt that she might possess suicidal tendencies, end quote. Okay, so Don Mueller claimed he'd made an unofficial missing persons report on March 10th, but now, on the 30th, he was filing a formal report. His story was that on the early afternoon of March 5th, he and his wife Marie had a big argument. Note that he did not tell police that the two were in the process of divorcing. At approximately 7:30 p.m. on Sunday after the fight, he left the house for a drive, he said. He went to the airport to watch the aircraft take off and land, and he returned to the residence at approximately 10:45 p.m. There he found the children, Donna and Dawn, in bed asleep, but his wife Marie was gone. So were her house keys and one Samsonite white leather suitcase. Her Cadillac automobile was still at the house. Dr. Mueller told the police he had no idea what Marie was wearing when she allegedly left, but he did say that she was carrying large amounts of cash, up to $40,000, and was wearing $150,000 worth of jewelry. She also took her Amex card. I'm quoting from the police report here. Dr. Mueller stated that shortly after arriving at his office at Grandview Medical Center at approximately 9:15 a.m. on March 6th, he received a phone call from his wife, during which she reportedly directed several minutes of obscenities toward him and asked him, quote, "Well, now how do you like it?" According to him, this referred to her leaving him. At this point, she terminated the call, end quote. Dr. Mueller told various people that his wife had left him and the kids. He said he called Marie's mom at least twice looking for her, but she hadn't heard from Marie. So now, 25 days later, he was filing an official report. The original missing persons flyer, dated April 14, 1972, describes Marie and says she has been missing since March 5th. It reads, quote, "Subject has been despondent and possesses possible suicidal tendencies. May have in her possession a pistol of unknown caliber," end quote. This information had been related to the authorities exclusively by Dr. Mueller and was not backed up by anyone else who knew Marie. Investigators learned that Marie had filed for divorce in 1971. Her friend told police that when Dr. Mueller found out about the divorce petition, he was upset and told the friend's husband, a fellow doctor, that if he wanted to get rid of Marie, he knew how to do it. After this, Marie had told several people, including her hairdresser and her friend Judy Youngman, that she feared for her life and felt her husband might harm her. They also found a letter that had been sent to E.F. Hutton and Company from Alton, Illinois, which bore the signature of Marie Mueller. This letter was received by the Hutton office on May 26, 1972, several months after Marie went missing. The letter instructed E.F. Hutton to liquidate the joint account held by Dr. and Mrs. Don Mueller and disperse any funds from the account to Dr. Mueller. The police report states, quote, "The officers at the Hutton Company, having learned of Mrs. Mueller's disappearance, immediately became suspicious and contacted this department and turned over the letter," end quote. A police document examiner concluded that Marie's signature on the Hutton letter was a forgery. The police also found similar information regarding the deed to the Mueller's house. A quitclaim deed had been filed with the St. Louis County Recorder of Deeds on June 14, 1972. On the quitclaim, the signature of Marie Mueller appeared and relinquished all claim to the home at No. 2 Country Estates in Frontenac. This quitclaim was signed by a white woman who said she was Marie Mueller and told the notary public that she just wanted her husband out of her life forever. Police notes indicate that Marie's signature appears to be the same as the one that was deemed forged on the E.F. Hutton document. A second quitclaim was filed on the house, assigning all rights to it to Dr. Mueller's mother. The house was appraised at $190,000, which is about $1.35 million today. Additional investigation uncovered that prior to her disappearance, Marie had opened a safety deposit box in 1971 at Colonial Bank. On March 13, 1972, Dr. Mueller presented a letter to the bank, purportedly signed by Marie, which authorized him to access the safety deposit box, and he emptied it at that time. Frontenac police determined that the last person other than her husband who had definitely seen Marie in person was her friend Judy Youngman. Judy told police in 1972 that Dawn and Marie were at her house for a party on the night of Saturday, March 4th. They stayed into the wee hours of the 5th, around 4:30 a.m. After that, there are reports that the children told police that their parents were fighting during the day on Sunday, and after that, Marie vanished. On April 3rd, police removed several items from the home that were thought could possibly bear fingerprints from Marie Mueller for comparison purposes. The property was thoroughly searched in April 1972 by Frontenac police, who brought cadaver dogs. We don't have access to the reports about the results of this search or any others. The police report we do have reflects a strange story reported by a friend of Dr. Mueller's. This man said the doctor called him and asked him to purchase a tree to plant at the house. The man agreed and brought a tree over, and when he arrived at the house, he found a hole already dug and a broken shovel and a new shovel. He planted the tree and filled in the rest of the hole, and noted later that the doctor was sure to set up a sprinkler to water just that particular tree, even though the house had extensive shrubbery and bushes. Police also contacted all the local taxi companies to see if they had possibly transported Marie, but none of them had any records of that. The police report also reflects that Dr. Mueller had a private pilot's license and often took trips to various parts of the country in rented airplanes. A former employee who had been a nurse in Dr. Mueller's office told the police that he committed fraudulent transactions as a routine part of his practice. He charged people for blood tests and x-rays and biopsies that he never actually analyzed or carried out. The investigators learned from colleagues of Dr. Mueller's that reports at the hospital were that he had murdered his wife. Marie's friend Judy Youngman told the investigators that Dr. Mueller had tried to get her husband to testify at a divorce proceeding between Marie and Don Mueller to the effect that Dr. Youngman had treated the Mueller children for severe beatings that had been inflicted by Marie. Dr. Youngman refused to cooperate because this story was untrue. Dr. Mueller was granted a divorce on July 8, 1972. In August 1973, police finally interviewed Catherine Coyne, who had been a maid at the Mueller residence. She said Dr. Mueller called her the day after Marie disappeared and told her that Marie had left. He said Marie had nagged him so much that he had finally busted her lip and made her nose bleed. He told Catherine that's why there was blood in the garage. Catherine told the police, quote, "He cleaned most of it up, but there was still some of it there when I got there. It was around on the garage floor, right alongside the passenger side of his car. There wasn't any blood anywhere else in the house, only on the garage floor." He told me that he went to the airport, and when he came back, she was gone. He said she took a bag, but that was all. There weren't any of her bags missing. None of her clothes were missing either. It was cold, and I know she would have had a fur coat on, but all her fur coats were right there in the closet. All her clothes, her shoes, her purses were still there, end quote. Catherine went on to relate, quote, "The little kids said that they were fighting all day Sunday. They said Mom and Dad had the biggest fight yesterday. They were fighting and fighting. They didn't know when or how she had left. They kept wondering when their mama was coming back," end quote. Catherine told police that in the past, she had overheard Marie on the phone with her mother, telling her that she was afraid of her husband. Dr. Mueller told a variation of this same story to a nurse in his office. This nurse was named Mary Green. She told the police that he told her that the day Marie left, they had a violent argument. He punched her in the face in his garage, knocking out a couple of teeth, and she bled all over the floor. When he left and went to the airport, she disappeared. Mary, however, told police that she believed Dr. Mueller hired someone to kill Marie. She said that was only her suspicion and she had no proof. It was based on the fraud that he perpetrated at his medical practice and things he said. According to a statement that Dr. Mueller made to Marie's mother, her daughter left with a set of house keys to the house and the house alarm. He also said that she didn't have her car keys and her car was found at the house. A friend of Dr. Mueller's named Wallace Anderson, a Cadillac dealer, told the police that Dr. Mueller told him after Marie disappeared that he had met with a hoodlum from Chicago and was told he didn't have to worry, he would never see his wife again. And then this from the police report, quote, "Anderson reported that Dr. Mueller traded in his 1972 Cadillac Eldorado coupe on or about December 7th of 1972, and that the trunk had been damaged by some type of acid," end quote. Nonetheless, the car had been sold, but the buyer returned it after 3 weeks, complaining that some type of acid was present in the trunk and was disintegrating the carpet and rusting the trunk bottom. Police tracked down this Cadillac and, quote, 4 different samples were taken of the mat and rusted areas and conveyed to the St. Louis County Police Lab for analysis, end quote. It's worth noting that Dr. Mueller had also prepared a title transfer relating to Marie's Cadillac, purporting that it bore her signature. The transfer authorized the car's ownership to be transferred to his mother. There is a lengthy segment in the police file about a police interview with a friend of Dr. Mueller's named Ronald George Lindeman. He said that he and Dr. Mueller discussed extensively how Dr. Mueller wanted help getting rid of his wife, Marie. The plan was that Dr. Mueller would buy a small piece of land or a farm in Lindeman's name as long as they could bury Marie there. Dr. Mueller planned to lure Marie out to the garage and shoot her there so she wouldn't get blood all over the house. He would then place her in the trunk of the car and take her somewhere and pour some hydrochloric acid on her body. Lindeman said that he never actually helped Dr. Mueller, but they definitely discussed various ways to kill his wife. Dr. Mueller also asked him how to have documents forged. The investigators actually had Lindeman call Dr. Mueller and try to get him to say something incriminating on tape. Then they wired him up and sent him over to talk to Dr. Mueller in person on a few occasions. In one conversation in which Dr. Mueller's lawyer was also present, Dr. Mueller told Lindeman that a bottle of muriatic acid that he had used in his pool had spilled in his trunk. It's as though he knew he was being recorded. A Mrs. Erickson, a neighbor, did not know Marie well, but reported that she was surprised when Marie told her that she felt that Dr. Mueller was going to kill her, probably by shooting her. Their conversation was interrupted at that point and was never concluded, but it was just 3 weeks later that Marie disappeared. In October of 1973, Herb Smith, Marie's brother, brought in some papers to the Frontenac Police Department that were Dr. Mueller's personal, day-by-day records of his patients. Before she vanished, Marie had given them to Herb and told him, if anything happened to her, to turn these papers over to the police department. The content of these papers is unknown. A police report dated March of 1975 reflects, quote, this case was presented a second time to the St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, end quote. Clearly, the prosecutors declined to prosecute the case. Absent a body, they likely felt that a case against Dr. Mueller for Marie's murder was unlikely to succeed. In April 1975, police interviewed 11-year-old Donna Mueller, who is our guest today. They asked her about her mother's jewelry. She said that after her mother had left, her father gathered all her jewelry and did something with it, but she didn't know what. This means that he lied about Marie leaving with her jewelry. Donna and her brother Don were finally contacted by a detective from the Frontenac PD several years ago. He told them that the department had recently located files that had been missing for years. Those files, although incomplete, contained the information we have related today. They paint a very malevolent picture of Dr. Don Mueller and call into question his story about his wife leaving voluntarily. Her children were told their whole lives that their mother left them. Now they have reason to believe that that was not the case. Don Mueller died in 1993. He was never charged in the disappearance of his wife, Marie Mueller. DNA from some of Marie's 12 siblings is on file in case her remains are located. Marie Beulah Smith Mueller is a Caucasian female. She has red hair and blue eyes. She has curved, claw-like fingernails, mastectomy scars on her chest, and 2 scars on her abdomen, one of which is from an appendectomy. If you have any information about her or Dr. Don Mueller, please call the Frontenac Police Department at 314-994-9300. Mike Morford sat down to talk with Marie Mueller's daughter, Donna Mueller, about her mother's case. That conversation is coming up after a word from our sponsors.
Hey, it's Donna.
Hey, how are you? So essentially, I just sort of go through the backstory of the case and what happened, what was going on in your mom's life up until, she went missing, and then sort of the aftermath, what transpired after that, and where things stand, 50 years later now.
Yeah, it has been 50 years as of a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I was so young at the time. I could just tell you just what I know from experience, which is limited, and then family talk, I guess.
Okay.
I know that my parents had been arguing a lot. They were both very unhappy in the relationship. And this started when I was like 5. And I do remember my brother and I would get very upset when they were fighting. And sometimes we would spy on them and try and take notes. But I was the only one that could write since I was 5 and he was 3. Anyway, we would always threaten to call the police on my parents, and there was nothing the police could do. They're just fighting. But we were just like, we didn't know what to make of it, and like we'd call our grandparents and tell them what was going on, and I think that's kind of how everybody started finding out, that there was issues. And I know they had separated for a while, and I know that for a little while my mom had been sick, and after they started the divorce proceedings, and I know she was, I want to say she went to the Mayo Clinic, and I don't know if my dad had connections there because he was a physician, but she went up there for a little while, and I don't remember what she was ill with. I don't know that was really ever discussed amongst the family, and being so young, I don't really remember. But then there were periods where they would, be back on good terms. When things were bad, I know we were kind of shuffled off to my grandmother's house, my dad's mom's house, and we lived there back and forth for a while. I know that at other times my dad lived there with my grandma for a while. So, but everybody made sure we were taken to school and our basic needs were taken care of. And then all I know is that we hadn't seen our mom for a while, I want to say several days. And my dad sat us down and said that he didn't think that mom was coming back, that she didn't love us anymore, that she left us and she didn't want to be a mom anymore. And of course we burst into tears because we're, by this time 7 and 5. And we were devastated. And really no explanation of what happened. And I think after a while, when people would say, "Where's your mom?" I would just say, she's deceased. And that was kind of the end of the conversation. Didn't know what else to say. And
You're sort of, you don't really know how to handle that. This is, you just know your mom's out there and you miss her. And I am curious, and maybe you were too young to really know this, but going back to when she did go missing, were there any adults that were wondering where she was at, or what story did your father have for them?
Well, my mother was one of 13 children, and they were all from Wisconsin. So she was very close with her mom, and I know that they talked frequently on the phone. And I think that, and her family kind of was beginning to understand that there was issues, I think right before she disappeared. I think that my dad initially had contacted her family and said, do you know where she is? She took off, that kind of thing. But she left without, her car. And, she had a million pairs of shoes and a million purses. So it would have been hard to determine what was taken and what wasn't. But again, I was 7. So all I know is that just one day she wasn't there anymore. And it seemed that, it was maybe a few days she had been gone when my dad called, her parents and said, do you know where she is? And then he finally officially contacted the police department, I think 3 weeks later. And a lot of this story we didn't know until 2016, I think it was. A detective from the Frontenac Police Department contacted my brother and I and just said that, we wanted to talk to you about your mother's disappearance. We found, her file. And we're like, what? First of all, this is opening up new wounds or old wounds, and we're just kind of like, what, our father's been deceased for almost 30 years. And pretty much everybody that was around at that time is no longer with us. Or if they are, I don't know about it. I've tried to reach out to a few people that we found in the that were named in the files. And I remember I flew back to St. Louis at one point because I travel back there frequently. I have a lot of family and friends still there. And I went to the Frontenac Police Department and got copies of the files and just went to a local restaurant and had a cocktail and just read everything. It was about 90 pages long. I sent copies to my brother, who was back here in Arizona at the time. And I said, I just read it. And then he's like, well, then let's talk about it. I said, I don't want to talk about it tonight. I just want to process it. We need time to process all this. Because this is all stuff that we knew nothing about. I mean, all the details in that police file, we had no idea that most of that took place.
So
we were just stunned.
You went from, okay, our mom just walked off and left, to finding this police report that has some disturbing stuff in it, I'm assuming.
Yes. And yeah, I mean, it was, I think when I got this stuff, I mean, I just remember the next few days flying back to Phoenix and kind of just processing and digesting this. I think my brother and I were both just in kind of a state of shock and not sure what to make of it because, you know, we've gone on with our lives and we have families and kids and grandkids and stuff now. And, you know, this is not really talked about. My brother and I never really talked about any of this before that phone call from the detective in Missouri. And so I think this kind of, I think in the police report, or maybe the detective mentioned that they put our mom on, you know, various websites, Wed Sleuth and NamUs and all this Charlie Project and all these things. You know, we just I just started looking up. I'm pretty good with the internet. So I was just Googling her name and finding all these images and pictures of her that I'd never seen before. And it was pretty disconcerting to see all the stuff that's on the internet about your mom, who you thought was, I mean, by now I think it's reasonable to assume she's probably no longer with us, no matter what happened or what anybody's thoughts are, because I think some of the family is split. I think some people think she's missing. I think some people think that she's no longer here and that my father had a hand in it, which after reading the police report seems likely. But, you know, he was a physician and they take that oath. And so I'd like to think that my father wouldn't have, you know, done away with her. Did he have somebody do it? I mean, who knows? Nobody knows. Wow. We have just no idea. But I'd like to think that, you know, being one of 13 children and very close to her family, somebody would have heard from her, unless, you know, I think somebody suggested, well, maybe she knew something she wasn't supposed to know and she was put in witness protection, and then we would never know. But so there's a lot of theories running amongst the family, and I don't know.
I can imagine.
Really, all I know.
It's got to open up a lot of old wounds and create some new ones. You know, especially when you hear that your father may have played a role in her disappearance.
Yeah, and it's weird because he's been gone for so many years, and my relationship with him was pretty tumultuous for many other reasons, for rebellious teen, all that kind of stuff. But I kind of wish he was still here because I have a lot of questions. And I think my brother does too. But I think at this point, my brother's decided, you know, these are my thoughts, these are my opinions, and I'm just going to put this to rest and, you know, get back on with my life. And to a degree, I agree. But at the same time, what if she did just leave? What if she just up and left? Then does anybody know where she is? I mean, it's been 50 years, over 50 years. You know, this is like a one-time shot. Maybe somebody out there does know something. Maybe there's been enough time past that they could comfortably come forward and say, here's what I know, or something. I mean, that's kind of what I was hoping to get out of this, is that maybe, you know, it's a sliver of hope, but just that's all you need is that sliver.
Have you heard all the stories on the news lately about cold cases being solved by forensic genealogy? Are you fascinated by unsolved mysteries that you wish could be answered? Are you intrigued by DNA technology and its application to cold murder cases? Or do you just love a good story with a satisfying ending? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then I have the podcast for you. DNA ID is the only true crime podcast dedicated exclusively to cold cases solved by forensic genealogy. On my show, you'll get all the behind-the-scenes details on how these cases were brought to closure and how the victims finally got justice. Listen to DNA ID Season 3 starting January 16th, 2023, wherever you get your podcasts.
Your mom essentially was reported missing, March 1972?
Yes.
I'm curious, so the story you're given as a child is, okay, your mom doesn't love you, she's gone, it's just us, we have to stick together. So that's the official story you get. When you get this police report and you read through it, what's the story that the police report is saying?
The police report really leans heavily on trying to pin my dad. And I think there's obviously, the husband is the first to be looked at and under a microscope. But the size of the microscope they had back in 1972 was so much smaller than the size of the microscope, with regards to technology that we have today. And what's even a different added layer to all this is my brother and I are both adopted. So these are our adopted parents. And I don't remember if it was mentioned in the police report, to be honest, but when that detective from Frontenac called us several years ago, 2016, I think it was, he wanted us to submit DNA tests, and he also was, all gung-ho about, you guys need to submit to DNA, and there's all these missing bodies, and we need to do this, and we need to do this. And I mean, and then he wanted us to, he asked us why we had never given statements to the police. And I said, when we were 7 and 5, really? I mean, I just thought that was silly. And then, with the DNA, I said, well, my brother and I are both adopted, so we are not biologically related to each other, nor are we biologically related to Don or Marie Mueller. And that was kind of a gut punch in the stomach to the police officer, because I think that he assumed that we would provide DNA and that, he was going to do something with this case. And we've tried to communicate with him since that initial phone call, almost 7 years ago, and have never heard back from him. He's been promoted, so he's not even working on cold cases or anything anymore. But I believe it is the only cold case in the city of Frontenac, which Frontenac's a suburb of St. Louis. And I think that he thought once he got promoted, he would be able to, get this off the books. And I think when he delved into it further and further, he just kind of went, yeah, maybe not.
A 50-year-old case is not going to be easy to solve, and there's not many details. And now you're telling him that you're not even related, so they can't do any DNA work with you. Yeah. So he probably realized this was a uphill battle and decided not to pursue it. But still, you think they would call you back and, say, hey, we are following up, or it's still open, or there's not much we can do, something. It's disheartening to hear them say that to bring this up and sort of not talk about it again and not respond to you since then.
And I do know that some of my mother's biological family has submitted DNA for testing. So if anything were to ever come of that, then there is something on file. But, without a body, I guess, or a person, it is a long shot. And it is what it is. But I wish I could tell you more about my mom. I don't really have a lot of memories about her. I remember being homesick from school once, and she, bought me a picture of David Cassidy, one of my favorite entertainers at the time. So, I remember her making meals for us and doing dishes and normal things. But other than that, at age 7, you haven't really you don't have an understanding of family, and you're not really, it's all about you as a child. It's not really about your parents. You don't start asking your parents things about their life until you're older, I think, or you don't have that genuine curiosity. Anyway, and then for her to be gone, and then us having to just kind of pick up our lives and keep going, keep going to school and keep doing what we're doing. And inside we were traumatized, and that was never addressed as children. And all that trauma really affected us, I think, as we progressed through our lives. And I've been in therapy, so I'm able to deal with things a lot better than I was. And I know a little bit more about myself as a result of that. But it would still be nice to have, if just one person listens to this podcast and goes, oh, I remember that, or I have this little sliver of information, something. I would really like to have a morsel of information, something.
Maybe a friend or acquaintance of, your adopted parents, somebody that knew what was going on at the time. I know there was mention in the police report of maybe a housekeeper or nannies or something being questioned to see if they had any information. Yeah. Do you know if they were able to provide anything to police to give them anything to go on?
I don't believe so. And I vaguely remember those people. They weren't really around. The two specific nannies and that were mentioned in the police report, I just have very fleeting memories of both of them, and they weren't in our lives for very long. So I think that they tried to track down one housekeeper, and I think they couldn't find her or something like that. It just seemed that, I don't know, it's just really weird. I would like to think that the one nanny that we had at that exact time could have told us something, but I don't remember if she was a live-in, because we had a live-in for a while, and or if she just came to help us out throughout the day and whatnot. But again, I mean, I was 7, so memories are kind of sparse. But yeah, I don't think anybody was able to put the pieces of the puzzle together.
What made them think, according to the reports, it seemed like they were focused on your father. What made them think that he played some kind of role in it versus him telling the truth about her just leaving?
Well, the fact that he didn't do anything about her disappearance right away, and that he kind of just went about it nonchalantly. Like, normally, I would think a spouse would be genuinely upset that their spouse left. I mean, what happened? I mean, it just seems so, I don't know. I think that there was probably a lot of comments or actions that I don't know anything about. Some of the pictures that were painted of my dad by some of his former staff were a little shocking. And I'm wondering, I don't know, that maybe he wasn't the greatest doctor in the world. And out of everything I have to hold on to, I did think he was a good physician because, if my brother and I were ever sick or had any kind of maladies, I was hospitalized a couple of times with various things, and, we were always well taken care of. And I don't know. It's weird because I think so differently of my dad after reading the police files. And I was in touch with one of my dad's former girlfriends. Her name is Jan, and she's still alive and lives back in the St. Louis area. And she was questioned by police, but I remember asking her about it, and she just said, your dad would have never done anything like that. And that's not the dad that, that's not your dad, the way that they were talking. And, they're always trying to pin it on the husband. And I think she was so in love with my dad that it never would have occurred to her he could have done something or been a part of something like that. So I don't think she's even willing to entertain the notion that, and I've never told her about the police files because I don't know that it would do any good at this point. And she's elderly, and I don't know if it would come as a shock to her. Some of the stuff in the files.
Pretty disturbing. I do notice that they at least by spring, not long after she went missing, they brought out cadaver dogs and did searches of your property. Now, obviously, you were young
Yes.
at the time. You may not have even been home when they did this, but what came of that? What did they find, if anything?
I'm guessing they found nothing because there was really no mention of that ever again. And it's weird because before the police report, I do remember my dad mentioning that. And I think we were at our grandmother's at the time. So we would not be subjected to that. And probably not to rattle the dogs that we had at the time. I think we were all just shuffled off to grandma's house again. But I do remember my dad mentioning that maybe at Thanksgiving dinner one night or something, like some random, oh yeah, the cadaver dog search. And I think I almost like dropped my fork, like, what? But when I read that in the police report, I thought, oh, that did happen. Okay.
Wow.
But since I wasn't there, but yeah, I mean, I clearly didn't find anything. But there is a mention in the police report about a tree that my dad had planted and that he had already had a hole dug and a shovel. So I'd like to think that the cadaver dogs would have found something around that tree because it was a subject of conversation between some family members and I about that because I thought that was kind of weird that my dad would just get a one-off plant out of, a tree out of the middle of nowhere and just plant it in the yard in the midst of all this other stuff going on.
There are some things that jump out of the report. That's one of them. Can you tell us a little bit more about this tree planting situation?
All I know is what I read in the police report and that my dad had a friend or a friend of a friend come out and plant a tree in the side of the yard. And we had about an acre or so, I guess. And so, but it wasn't like a landscaping company that came out and did it. It was just some random guy, friend of a friend or what have you. And I thought it was weird because my dad had so many other plants. We had specific trees that were kind of lined the property, the perimeter of the property. They weren't allowed to have fences. And I think my dad didn't like that. So his way around that was to put up a bunch of similar trees around the perimeter of the yard. So it was kind of like a fence. So it was, my dad had like a landscaping company do all this stuff. So a few years after we moved in to just have some random tree planted was strange. And there's several supplemental reports that I don't have access to. And I think that the city of Frontenac has never really, they've been very vague about where some of those supplemental reports are and why I can't have copies. So either those are still lost or maybe there's some juicy information in there they don't want me to have. I don't really know.
And I know that this person that was to plant this tree or whatever, that he went on to say that your dad went as far as to put a sprinkler system in to water that particular tree, but didn't really pay too much attention to the other trees in the yard, which kind of comes off as strange, like he's taking care of this one tree and not all the rest of them. And I guess the theory is that possibly he may have disposed of your mom's remains in that hole. Is that what they were thinking, or what the theory was?
I think that was I think that was the initial thought. And that's why I would love to know, there was a supplemental report about what the cadaver dogs found. And I've never seen that. No one's ever, if that file exists, it may be lost. I don't know. There's a lot of supplemental reports that are mentioned in the police files, and I've never seen any of those. I've never been given access to those. And like I said, the city was kind of a little bit vague about some of those reports. So I'm making an assumption that most of those supplemental reports are also lost. And if this is the only cold case in that city, like ever, it may have been one of the only homicides or that type of case, missing person, whatever you want to call it, in that city, like ever. So I just find it hard to believe that things went missing. How did that happen? In in a suburb where almost nothing happened. It was like a little bedroom community, somewhat affluent, nice part of town, and the police they've lost all this stuff? Really?
Yeah, maybe they weren't used to working on this kind of case, maybe, and that could be part of
Clearly.
it. Yeah.
Clearly.
And there's a lot of weird things that jump out of that police report too. I know there's something about a car with an acid melted trunk. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. We had a pool in the backyard, and at the time, and I don't know about now, but you would put chlorine and acid in it to keep it clean and swimmable. And so the muriatic acid, I guess my dad would go to the pool store and buy that stuff. And I guess that his story was that one of the bottles leaked out all over the back of his trunk. And I think that that's the part of this whole story where some of the family members kind of went, okay, we've got an idea of what happened. And it's so easy to jump to that conclusion because muriatic acid can basically disintegrate an entire body. And I think that if that something like that happened, we'll never know what happened. So again, there's a piece of me that's kind of, holding out hope that maybe that was the truth, that maybe it did, spill out into his trunk. I don't know. But the police seem to think that, they investigated the car. My dad apparently traded that car in for something else, and the police traced that car to whomever had purchased it and did a whole, whatever testing was available, I guess, back in the 70s. And I don't think anything came of it, but it did look very suspicious and does look very suspicious to me.
Yeah, and along those lines, there was some discussion of a guy, a friend of your dad's, I guess, by the last name of Lindemann, that may have had some part in planning or maybe at least discussing your mom's disappearance. What can you tell us about that person?
I don't know anything about that person. I don't think that person is still around because when I got the police report, I did look up several names and try to make contact with people. Some of my dad's friends, the Youngmans, that couple, they're gone. All of my dad's friends that I remember from my childhood are pretty much all deceased at this point. But again, I believe Mr. Lindemann is gone. At least my search efforts did not find anything. So it's a struggle, it's because the case happened so long ago.
Yeah. It's an uphill battle to try and find these people that might have some answers, but, correct me if I'm wrong, this Mr. Lindemann was supposed to have, at the very least, had discussions of possibly what would happen to your mom or how they would dispose of a body, things along those lines.
And I really wish I could ask him some questions, because how would you have this discussion with somebody and it not, you wouldn't bring that up to anybody, or you're just going to keep that as a secret? I don't know. I just find that very odd. So I think he may have been a bit of a shady character. I don't know how my dad came across him.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's maybe shows that your mom was worried that something might happen to her, but I read that before she vanished, your mom had given some papers or some records of some sort to her brother Herb, and basically saying if anything happened to her, turn that stuff over to police. Do you know what was in those papers, and if he ever did turn that stuff over to police?
I don't know what was in those. I don't know what was in those documents, And unfortunately, Herb passed away, I want to say 10 or 15 years ago. So I would have liked to have had a discussion with him after getting access to these police reports, because he probably would have remembered, I'm sure, some, if not all of it. And he was very close to my mom, and his wife as well was very close to my mom. So, and I remember when I was probably one of the first apartments I had, I might have been 20 or 21, and Herb and Dawn actually looked me up in the phone book. Remember those? And called me and just said they were driving through St. Louis on their way to Milwaukee, which is where they lived, and just wanted to chat with me. And I remember that they asked me a bunch of questions about my mom and basically wanted to know what happened. And I said, well, I was just going to ask you the same thing. So they had their hopes pinned on me being able to tell them what happened. And here I was like, well, you're the adults. I thought you would know. But, and I remember I went to a family reunion that they had up in Milwaukee several years ago and kind of got reacquainted with some family members. We lost all contact with any of her family after all that happened between her and my dad. So I'm not sure I do know a few family members told me they were afraid of my dad and that they had tried to, I guess, work something out so that her family could see us kids. We never saw our grandparents again. We never saw any of the aunts and uncles, cousins from that side of the family. And, one of the things that I never thought about, but after having a discussion with my cousin, my dad's brother's kids, they all kind of wondered, what happened to their aunt. And, they told me, the older ones anyway, told me they were crushed because they didn't know what happened to their Aunt Marie. And I just remember thinking, it never occurred to me that all these other people would be missing her. I thought it was just me and my brother. But, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of answers to anything. I remember there was a comment in the police report about my mom making some kind of comment to her hairstylist, and I want to say his name was Ralph, and I tried looking him up and got nowhere. But of course, so many things have changed in 50 years. But again, when I started doing the search of all the people that were named in these files, it was 7 years ago. And so, but still, I mean, so much time has passed, and I think I kind of hit a brick wall and gave up, as I'm sure many of my mom's siblings and other family members did years ago as well, just not really knowing.
50 years ago, her disappearing, like today, there'd be like social media you could look at. There'd be, text that people could say, okay, we were texting back and forth. But back then, there wasn't as much to go on as far as a paper trail, so to speak, to help fill in some of the blanks. Do you know if your mom was close to anyone, had any really good friends that she might have confided in?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of anybody that she was friendly with, mostly because a couple of years before she disappeared, we had just moved into a new home in a new neighborhood far away from where she and my dad had lived before. They had lived in the northern part of St. Louis and then moved to Frontenac, which is in the western part of the St. Louis area. And so I think she was kind of isolated. In addition to, she was from Wisconsin and from a small town in Wisconsin. And I think had been visiting friends who lived in St. Louis and then decided to move there. And so had an apartment and met my dad at that same apartment complex. And I think my dad had just had been graduated from medical school and had his own practice for a few years. And that's when they met. So I don't think that I think she had friends from when they lived up in the northern part of St. Louis, but here she was out in the western part. And, again, they just had regular telephones back then and not, no social media and limited television. And I think she was kind of isolated, being away from her family in Wisconsin and any friends she might have made when she first moved to St. Louis. So the only friend that I know she was really close to her hairstylist. That's why I wanted to reach out to him. And then one of my dad's physician friends, his wife and my mom were probably more than acquaintances, not quite friends. Something in there.
Mm.
And her name was Judy Youngman. And I think that Dr. Youngman was really good friends with my dad until my dad made some comments. There was a comment where he wanted Dr. Youngman to testify in court or in front of some police officers or something, that our mom had beaten us to a pulp and that we ended up in the hospital. And he refused to do that because it was a big fat lie and it was unethical. And I think from what I read in the police report, that really turned my dad's friend off to my dad, and they weren't really close after that.
Maybe showed a different side of your dad than that he wasn't familiar with.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have all this stuff going on, and then to top all this off, all these weird clues that are mentioned in the police report, I also saw that your dad had a pilot's license and he used to fly to different areas. He could have, if he is the one that harmed your mom, he may have even could have disposed of her body flying at someplace, which just makes the search for finding out what happened to her maybe even harder.
Yeah. And there's a lot of challenges to this case, and it's a very, very, very layered onion. So
yeah, that's a good analogy for this. You did mention earlier that being adopted, that you can't really provide anything as far as DNA that would help the police, but I know that other family members you mentioned, I think, can or will provide that. So, there's still a chance that maybe if your mom's remains are out there someplace and she's identified, that somebody else's in the family's DNA could help fill in some pieces to the puzzle here. How hopeful are you that one day you'll find out, whether her remains were found a long time ago or whether they're found in the future? How hopeful are you to find out that, they are found in some manner?
Yeah, I think all family members, including myself and my brother, would love to have some kind of closure. And if it was, I'm awfully just surprised that no remains have been found to this date. It's been 51 years, little over, and I just think that there should have been something at this point. You'd think, I would just think something would have come about at this point. So again, I'm just kind of hoping that somebody might hear this podcast and go, oh, I remember something about that, or something that might help us put one more piece of the puzzle, in it, and then it might take shape.
Yeah.
And if my dad did have a hand, I would sure just like to know that too. If it was something like that, what happened? I mean, I don't know that we'll ever know 100%, but I would at least like to know. I would like to have some kind of closure.
I'm curious, as an adult, you mentioned that he's been gone 30 years, but before he passed away, did you ever, as an adult or as an older child, go back and talk about your mom, or was she pretty much just not part of the conversation?
It was definitely off limits to even mention her name. We were not allowed to address her as anything other than Marie. We were not allowed to say mom. We were not allowed to refer to her as that. And my dad's last few years, he had dementia. So, and I had been actually estranged from him for a few years before that. I kind of went off to college, didn't do really well, and kind of was struggling to find my way as a young adult. And my dad didn't understand why I didn't have a better grasp on my life. And so, and he had moved out here to Arizona. I was still living back in St. Louis at the time. So there was several years where we didn't really have much in the way of communication. And my brother and he had moved out here. He had been diagnosed initially with emphysema, I think during my senior year of high school. And at the time, the thought was, the air is better out here and better quality air, and it's drier, and it would be better for, than a humid environment regarding the, his lungs. And so my brother had come out here with him, and when he got really bad, that's when my brother had called me and said, hey, it would be really great if you could move out here and help me. And so I moved out here about 2 years before he passed away. And so again, it was, we never talked about my mom, and he never brought it up. I thought towards the end there might be some kind of talk about what happened, and unfortunately that never happened. But again, dementia is just a really strange stranglehold on someone's brain anyway. So I think even if I were able to get him to say something, who knows if it would have been accurate.
Well, yeah, that's got to be frustrating too, to not have been able to ask them questions, but even if you did ask them, then you don't know that it would have been accurate or believable.
Right.
Wow. So, here we are half a century later since your mom went missing. I know you and your brother would like to at least get some kind of answers. How hopeful are you that you will get some kind of answers, or have you come to the conclusion that you're probably not going to find anything else out more than you already know?
Well, I think that it depends on what day you ask me. Today, I think there could be a sliver of hope. There are days where I'm like, I just need to make peace with the way things are, and that we'll never find out. But again, there's always that part of me that's holding on to a little bit of hope, and in hopes that there would be, at least, if not a full answer, somebody else could go, oh, this is what I know, and maybe we could, figure it out from there. I don't know. I know it's a long shot.
Yeah. Well, you never know. There might be someone out there who's listening that's somehow, maybe they were younger and they're still around. So if there's anyone out there that did know Marie Mueller or Dr. Don Mueller and was out in that Frontenac, Missouri area, please come forward and maybe you hold some kind of small piece of information. I can't thank you enough for coming on. This is a fascinating case and very frustrating, I can imagine, for you and your brother. So I hope somehow you do get some kind of information and find out the truth here.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Missing Persons. If you can provide any information to help solve the case we discussed in this episode, please contact the appropriate authorities.
If you enjoy this podcast, please take a moment to tell your friends about Missing Persons and invite them to listen to the show. Word of mouth will help us grow and bring these cases to a larger audience. You can also help us by taking a moment to rate and review Missing Persons on the platform you're listening to us now on.
We'd like to tell you a little bit about our Patreon program. If you visit patreon.com/missingpodcast, you can sign up to help this podcast through ongoing monthly support. As a thank you, we'll give you an on-air shout-out, a thank you card and sticker, plus you'll get early or ad-free access to episodes of the show and any bonus content.
Your Patreon support also goes towards helping the missing, because every dollar that we earn through Patreon will be split with charlieproject.org, the wonderful website that's been sharing information about so many missing persons cases for years. We hope you'll consider supporting the show. Just a reminder that new episodes of Missing Persons air every other Saturday. If you want to find us on social media, we're on Facebook at facebook.com/missingpersonspod. We're also on Twitter with the handle @missing_pod. And of course, you can find us and contact us through our website, missingpersonspodcast.com. On behalf of Jess Betancourt, this is Mike Morford saying thanks, and we'll see you next time on Missing Persons.